All right. So I just started recording. So thank you for everyone who came by for this talk today. Just to introduce ourselves, my name is Khalil. I'm a second year medical student and I'm one of the leaders of Climate Action Group. I'm joined by one of my co-leaders, Anya, who is a student in the graduate medical school. And I'm also joined by Candace, one of my classmates, who is the BU Sustainability Liaison. Is that right? Or intern for the medical school. And we're really excited to have Katie Robbins here, who is the Zero Waste Manager from BU Sustainability, to tell us all about the Zero Waste Plan, what it entails, and how we can help make this goal achievable for our university. So without further ado, take it away, Katie.
Thanks so much, Khalil. And thanks everyone for coming. It's exciting to have the chance to talk to you. I know there's a lot going on at the start of the semester, but I hope that you'll find some of this interesting. So just quickly, I'll frame the issue of waste a little bit, what we're up against. Talk briefly about what is zero waste, because it's a little bit of a confusing term. We'll talk about what BU is doing in our zero waste plan. And then I want to focus pretty significantly on what is the role of BU students? How does this impact you? How can you help us achieve this goal? And in one of those significant ways is through waste sorting. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So to start off, I want everyone to think about how many times a day you think, oh, I'll just throw that away. You have something in your hand, you just toss it in the trash. But how many times do you pause to think about where is away? And when you're in Boston, away is just up the coast in Saugus, Massachusetts, to a waste to energy incineration facility that's located in an environmental justice community. And for decades, it's been demonstrated that the materials that we make and use and how we dispose of them have significant environmental impacts. And in the 1980s, it was thought that this waste to energy solution was kind of the silver bullet for getting rid of our trash. But as it turns out, the incineration produces 25% more greenhouse gas emissions than an average coal-fired power plant per unit of energy generated. So it is definitely not the solution. And they're often located in diverse communities and lower income communities. So part of zero waste is not contributing to the impacts on those facilities. And beyond the negative impacts of the disposal process, the issue with waste is also the entire life cycle of that material. For every 1 ton of waste we discard, 71 tons of waste have already been produced upstream through mining and manufacturing and processing and transport, everything that happened in order to get that product into your hand generated waste. And that's kind of the unseen portion of waste. So knowing all of this, we need to rethink and redesign how our materials flow through society to more efficiently use our resources. And that's exactly what zero waste does. So for the verbal processors out there, the definition is the conservation of all resources by means of responsible production, consumption, reuse, and recovery of products, packaging, and materials without burning and with no discharges to land, water, or air that threaten the environment or human health. For the numbers processors, it's commonly measured through 90% of total waste being diverted from landfill or incineration. So only 10% is being sent to a landfill or incinerator. The other 90% is being eliminated through redesign of systems. It's being recycled, composted, donated. The list goes on. For the visual processors, it's easiest to think of it in this kind of triangular hierarchy we have here now, which is similar to a food pyramid flipped on its head. So you want to take the most action and put the most focus towards the top of this pyramid. So in the rethink, redesign, reduce, and reuse categories are where we have the most opportunity to make an impact and reduce our waste. And rethinking and redesigning is not something that you normally, those words aren't something you hear when you think of waste. And so it really gets to the core of, how does our society use materials? How are we purchasing things and how are we disposing of them? And how can we do that in a way that mirrors natural processes more and promotes a circular economy? So that's the focus of this top chunk of the hierarchy. And as you move down, recycling and composting is probably the one that most of you interact with on a daily basis. And it's absolutely essential, even though you'll see it is not as significant of an opportunity as the rethink and redesign, reduce and reuse portion. But recycling and composting and doing it correctly is very essential, and one of the ways that community members on an everyday basis can contribute to creating a zero waste society and a zero waste system at BU. Material recovery means after we've recycled and composted everything that we can, what's left and how do we get that into the hands of someone who needs it if it's a usable material? So this is where you get into donation and redistribution, things like that. Residuals management is, again, looking at after we recover the materials we can, what do we do with what's left before sending it to landfill or incineration? And then under the zero waste framework, what's unacceptable is the incineration or landfilling of your material. So really that is your last resort option for any material that's flowing through a system. So how does this fit into the university? And I should mention, I can see some questions coming through the chat. I did leave some time for questions at the end, and Khalil and Candace are gonna help kind of monitor that. So I'm just gonna fly through this and then we'll circle back. So Boston University has a climate action plan that establishes a goal of carbon neutrality by 2040. And there's many different areas in which we need to look at the university's impact in order to achieve that carbon neutrality. And one of them is acting on our indirect emissions. And waste is a source of indirect emissions. So with that in mind, and with the approval of the Climate Action Plan in 2017, we started setting our sights on zero waste and considering how do we achieve 90% diversion of our total waste at the university? How do we redesign our systems and change our culture to support a goal that is that aspirational? So we made a plan, which is always a good starting place. So we assembled a task force of over 50 individuals from across the university, folks from leadership and faculty, staff, and students who sat in rooms together and collaborated on how to achieve zero waste at the university in a variety of different areas. And this is an image of one of our promotional posters, which I'm hoping that maybe you saw. I believe this was in October. So we've got the plan now, and we're promoting it to the community. We want the community to know that the university is committed to implementing this plan, and that we need everyone's individual help in enacting it. So there's 6 main areas of action that the plan outlines: redesigning systems, reducing waste, reusing resources, recycling and composting, changing our culture to make zero waste practices the norm, and using our opportunity for leadership that we have at the university to develop sustainable markets. So you may have also seen some of these images too. This is part of the communications campaign that we're running about the zero waste plan. If you haven't seen them, keep an eye out, trying to use nice bold colors and graphics. So it's a huge step for the university to have a plan at all and to have high level leadership support for this. But it's only the first step in our journey towards zero waste. And so I do want to tell you specifically some of the things that we've achieved in the last year. But before I do that, I want to kind of paint the picture of what does zero waste look like at the university? What is this plan outline for what a student's life could look like by the year 2030? So I have a couple examples here. So picture you're sitting in a classroom and you get up from class and you look around and there's no trash or recycling bins, and you maybe panic at first, but you realize that, okay, I'm going to go outside, and in the hallway there's going to be a nice central station for trash and recycling with signage that tells me how to sort my waste properly, and everybody is following the rules and taking a moment to sort their waste properly. That's one piece of it. Let's say you're moving apartments and you need furniture and storage. Instead of heading over to Target in Fenway or something, you go on the university's future online asset exchange program, where students are exchanging goods for free with each other to reduce the need to purchase new. If you're planning an event and you're using BU catering, they have a zero waste drop-off option where all the materials that they provide you with are divertible, either compostable or recyclable. And you, as the event person, you remember to only order as much food as you need for your number of participants. And if you have any leftovers, you give those away instead of throwing them out. And if you're a new student, and this is where the culture change piece gets in, you're at orientation, and at orientation, it's already a conversation that as a BU student, here are your expectations in terms of upholding the zero waste practices that the university prioritizes, and how to be a conscious consumer and someone who thinks about their individual impact, kind of embedding it in the way of life at BU from the very first day that you become a student. So obviously there's a million different scenarios, and most of these things are not yet in existence, but that is the future that we're working towards. So far we've made some really great progress that I'm excited to share with you. Some of it is specific to Charles River campus, and some of it's more specific to the medical campus. So I'll try and just briefly go through some of these because I really want the community to understand the university behind the scenes is putting significant resources and money and time into operational changes that support this zero waste goal and the zero waste plan. And the piece that we cannot necessarily dictate as much is how the community then supports these changes and contributes to the progress. So in the area of redesign, we've completely redesigned our waste contracts. So the companies that take our waste from campus and bring it to a processing facility, we've partnered with strategic companies who have a high level of transparency, data, and are being real partners with us in working on how to reduce our waste and optimize our services. In planning, design, and construction, which is a very large area of the university, they are piloting a new 75% diversion standard for all their small projects and working with all of their general contractors on better reporting. So again, we have more transparency into where is our waste even coming from. In the category of reduce, we just launched a reusable container program on the Charles River campus for our dining halls. and for post-consumer food waste reduction, which means anything that is not coming from a back of the house dining hall. We've really ramped up our donation of edible food. And in the last fiscal year, we donated more than 20,000 pounds of food to a couple of different places: Food for Free, the Student Food Rescue, and Rosie's Place. For recycling and composting, the Charles River campus was a little bit behind the medical campus on this. Medical campus has single stream recycling, which I'll talk a little bit about later. But we updated the infrastructure on the Charles River campus to match that. And we're also expanding composting. We've expanded to 2 large residence halls on the Charles River campus, and we are laying the groundwork for expansion to checkers on the medical campus, hopefully in the next academic year. For market development, we've developed and launched our sustainable purchasing program, which is a resource for faculty and staff to choose sustainable alternatives when they make a purchase. And I've mentioned the communications campaign and shown a couple of images from that. That will continue for the rest of the academic year. And finally, the Center for Computing and Data Sciences, which is, any of you have visited the Charles River campus or been in a high building and looked at the Boston skyline, you'll probably see at this point that the building is up, and that is on track to be one of the country's first higher education zero waste certified buildings. There's only one other successful certified building at a university in North America right now. And so we are hoping to be the second. So those are all a lot of operational changes. And I want to try and clarify, what is the role that students can and should be taking in this? So I've outlined 5 key, pretty basic steps that I'm hoping feel achievable and digestible for you all to know that you're contributing to this progress and the behind the scenes work that the university is doing. So first, reducing your personal waste by rethinking your purchasing habits and using reusables. This is a very individual action and something that everybody has to kind of do for themselves with their own financial constraints and accessibility constraints. But at the point of purchase, especially when you go grocery shopping or shopping for things for your home, rethink, do you really need this? Is this where I want to buy this from? Can I borrow it from a friend instead? Those kinds of questions before you just kind of default make a purchase with something that's maybe low quality. Ask yourself, do I really need this? Second, learn waste sorting rules. Sounds like kind of an unfun task, but truly one of the most important things you can do at BU to contribute to our material actually getting recycled and actually getting composted. I'm sure all of you, if you're here and interested in sustainability, have heard folks say, oh, it doesn't actually get recycled. It doesn't actually, it just gets put in with the trash. And I'm here to tell you that if the waste is clean enough, it does definitely get recycled and it definitely gets composted. But it's up to the individual to make sure that they're following the Massachusetts rules about what can be recycled and composted. That ensures it gets to its proper end destination. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Number 3, participate in BU zero waste programs. Frankly, there aren't a ton available to students right now, and I'm very aware of that. The plan outlines more and more programs each year that will be launched that will give students more of a way to get involved. So keep your eyes on our social media, your eyes on BU Today and the Med Campus newsletter for announcements about new programs that are being launched, and stay engaged. 4, helping your peers learn about the issue of waste and what they can do. it's so awesome that y'all are here and hearing this, but we need them to spread the message to those who it's maybe not on the forefront of their mind, and help them understand, why is this important for everyone? And lastly, to the extent you can, as extremely busy medical students, take initiative to contribute in your own creative ways. We are very much relying on individuals to kind of step up and find ways to contribute to the zero waste movement at BU, as we, again, work behind the scenes on the operational side. So some resources we're providing to students to help with that is a couple of funding opportunities, like the SEED grant and the Campus Climate Lab program, joining the BUMC Climate Action Group, which is an awesome organization, and checking out sustainability internships. Sure, Candace would be happy to talk to you about her experience so far. We've got tons of opportunities, and are planning to regularly have a Med Campus intern. So it's a great way to get involved. So those are the main actions I wanted to give y'all so far. Of course, there's an endless list of things you can do, and I would say Google it, but sometimes it can be overwhelming. Remember that taking baby steps is most important, and don't lose perspective on how much your individual impact contributes to the collective impact. So speaking of that, I want to run through quickly a couple of the basics of waste sorting, because I mentioned it is absolutely imperative to the success of our program. It's keystone, it's foundational. So trash, if it isn't obvious, is any material that has no way of being reused, recycled, or otherwise diverted, and it must be sent to a landfill or incinerator. All of BU's trash, as I mentioned, is sent up to Saugus, Massachusetts, where it's incinerated, which is not great for public health, not great for the environment, something we want to avoid. So at BU, items that are commonly seen in the waste stream that are considered trash are things like cartons, like what your milk comes in and what coconut water comes in, if we've got any coconut water fans out there, chip bags and food wrappers, hot coffee cups, masks, utensils, dirty takeout containers, coated takeout containers like Chinese food, any sort of plastic bag or plastic wrap, bubble mailers, napkins, and food waste if there's no compost available, which at this point on the Med Campus, there really isn't any front of house publicly available composting. So recycling, on the medical campus, like I mentioned, we do single stream recycling, which means all types of recyclable material can go in the same bin. And recyclable material is cardboard, paper, plastic, metal, and glass containers. And the most important thing about recycling is not doing what we call wish cycling, which is you have an item in your hand, you want to do the right thing and put it in the recycling bin, but you're not sure if it actually is recyclable. So you put it in there and then it ruins the whole bin. We call that contamination. So following the waste sorting rules is very important to ensure that the entire bin actually does go to the recycling facility. Massachusetts, we have an advantage because we have standardized the list of recyclable materials statewide. That's not something that you see in many states across the US. And it's a real advantage for us because you really only have to learn the rules once and then you're good to go. So in Massachusetts, anywhere in Massachusetts, you can recycle metal food and beverage cans, plastic bottles, jars, jugs, and tubs, glass bottles and jars, and paper and cardboard, like mixed paper and newspaper, magazines, boxes. And all of those things need to be emptied, clean. If they're a food container, rinsed. Basically, you want that material ready to be made into something else. And then down here, I have a couple of the most common no items. So no bagging with plastic bags, no food or liquid, no clothing, no tanglers. Those are the kind of the big hitters. And finally, we've got the food waste stream. So food waste refers to any material that was once alive. So that includes actual food you might put in your body, as well as like napkins, because they came from trees. And an important distinction is that compost is both a noun and a verb. And this is why I normally say food waste and not compost, because it's commonly misunderstood and maybe used a little too liberally. So compost is both the organic material that can be turned into soil, and it's also the process by which you're taking food waste and turning it into soil. So it can get a little confusing, which is why we try and use the word food waste more often, but they're all in the same family. So at BU, we both compost and anaerobically digest our food, depending on the level of contamination. An anaerobic digestion facility can handle a higher amount of contamination than a compost facility. And so at locations where we see more contamination, where students aren't sorting waste as properly, we send that to a different facility. But the items that are accepted are the same, whether it goes to a compost farm or an AD facility. And those items are produce, dairy and eggs, meat and bones, bread and dry goods, and soiled paper products like coffee grounds and filters, tea bags, uncoated takeout containers, napkins, chopsticks, even because they're wood. The things you want to avoid in the food waste stream are anything that was listed in the trash and the recycling. Really think about it as if these things are going back into the ground and being made into soil to grow more food, which is what the majority of our compost that's the process it goes through. So those are things to keep in mind when you're standing at a bin wondering what to do with your item. I very much encourage you to check out this resource called recyclesmartma.org and do some research on the sustainability website and the dining website about how to sort your waste properly. Huge opportunity for impact. So with that, I'd love to open it up to questions and hear what's on everybody's mind.
I know one question, Katie, that's come up is how the pandemic has influenced the zero waste plan, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse, or just maybe altered the way that you approach things.
Definitely, it's a great question. It impacted the launch of our plan significantly by about a year, just about a year. So we are a year behind on the implementation of the plan, which makes our 2030 goal even more urgent because we've got a long way to go. I also think that the pandemic has the supply chain disruptions, which everyone is probably tired of hearing about at this point, but are very real. And so for materials that the university procures and provides, like through catering and through dining and in labs and at the medical facilities, there's been huge disruptions in that, where we don't have as many options to choose the greener alternative. And so we're kind of stuck with whatever we can find within the time frame that we can find it. So that's set us back on some of our goals to find more sustainable products. But we're charging ahead on any way that we can. And one thing about sustainability is that it just requires you to kind of constantly pivot and just make an impact wherever you can under whatever circumstances.
Hi, Katie. Thanks so much for all the information, especially everything related to trash and the nuances of disposing things properly. I guess one question I had was regarding changing people's practices. I definitely understand how each of us doing our part in creating a culture of zero waste and everyone kind of doing the right thing. I like the term. I hadn't heard about wish cycling, but I think that's kind of a great way to put it, because I'll admit I think we've all been guilty of putting something, oh, this seems like it goes there. But could you speak a little more on some of the I guess different things you can do to try to motivate people, or some creative ways to kind of change that culture, because our society unfortunately is so trash centric at this point?
Yes. Yeah, and that's a great point, right? It's behavior is rooted in the way our society is designed and constructed. We live in a society that prioritizes convenience and cheap products. And so it's going against the grain to transition yourself and your behaviors and the behaviors of others to more sustainable zero waste practices. But through individual action, we influence, the services and products that businesses provide. So we definitely do have purchasing power. But I would suggest, start with your friends to the level that you can. I think just friends support each other in their interests, their individual interests. And if this is something that matters to you, which I think, I'm biased, but I think that it should, talk to your friends about it and nudge them in the direction of changing some of their behaviors for the better. And from a student perspective, talk to professors and your folks in your labs about this and say, hey, this really matters. Do you think we can think about this? Do you think we could change this practice to reduce waste, or to avert this, or reuse this material? I think people are often very willing to make changes if they're not terribly inconvenient or uncomfortable. But it's just a matter of kind of knowing where to start. So being that person in the room who brings it to others' attention can have a significant impact.
Hey, thank you so much for coming to talk to us today. I have two quick questions. One is again about like the wish cycling and single stream recycling. I've heard sort of mixed things about going to single stream. Some people think it's really good because it makes it easier to recycle and there's a lower barrier to entry, and other people think that it sort of encourages people to just be like, this looks like it could be recycled, and throw it in there. What's your read on those trade-offs, and how do you think about them in BU's plan?
Great question. It's a hotly debated topic. And since I started working in this industry 10 years ago, it's still hotly debated. But the fact of it is that in Massachusetts, our processing capacity is set up to handle single stream recycling. So the sorting facility that we send our material to is designed to separate out cardboard, paper, glass, plastic, metals from a single kind of load of recycling. And I think that's what really matters, right? It is the right choice will vary from location to location, depending on the processing capacity. In Massachusetts, we're set up for single stream recycling. Now, it does promote kind of that wish cycling to an extent. However, it also gives us an opportunity to divert as much material as possible if we can be successful in teaching the community the proper waste sorting rules. So a lot of the, time, money, energy from the state has gone into educational campaigns about that. And I believe that single stream can be extremely effective if the community is following the correct rules. And behavior change is such an important kind of component of zero waste and of sustainability, that engaging the community is going to have to be a part of any change.
Thank you so much. That was really helpful. I didn't know that about how it worked in Massachusetts. I also have a question about something that has been an ongoing issue in my household. I won't say who's on what side of this one, but some members of my household feel that anything that is still usable should not be thrown out and should be given away. And other members of my household feel that certain things you can predict fairly well are not going to be reused. And you're basically just asking Goodwill to throw out your trash for you, and that is not in service of anyone. I'm interested to know what you think about, like, is there a wish cycling equivalent that happens with reusing and giving items away? And how should we think about that in our own lives?
An excellent question. I myself am guilty of a little bit of hoarding because I have trouble getting rid of usable goods. But certainly folks donating things that are not meant for reuse, not in quality for reuse, is a problem for organizations like Goodwill. And they do end up bearing a pretty great burden of disposing of a lot of material because people do give them trash. And so I do think it's the individual's responsibility to consider that. And the way I typically frame it for myself is like, would I myself want to reuse this, right? If you just don't have a particular need for it, but it is of good quality, then certainly give it up for a donation or for reuse. Give it to a friend, it's even better. But if it's broken, stained, dirty, something that you would never reuse yourself if you had the need for, don't pass it on. Then think about what's the most sustainable disposal method that I can have, right? If it's not going to be used by someone else, is it recyclable? Is it compostable? Or is it honestly just trash? And if it is trash, think about how to prevent putting yourself in that circumstance again. How did it get to being trash? Maybe I'm not going to buy that same product again. Maybe it was some cheap thing I got off Amazon, and next time I'm going to buy a higher quality item that is going to last a little longer. So it's those kind of questions, but I think it's a great thing to think about. I hope that helps your household debate.
No, that is super helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Katie, I have another question about individual purchasing. So in my household, we've tried to make more sustainable purchasing decisions. And sometimes it's obvious, like if you can get something without plastic and other options have plastic, that seems good. But are there any other tools that you use to know like which companies, which products are more sustainable than others?
Great question. For grocery shopping, which I think is one of the biggest categories we probably think about, there's not a lot of great bulk shopping. Farmers markets in the summer are really great. And like you said, anything that doesn't come in any sort of packaging is always the right decision. When that choice is not available, choosing items that come in highly recyclable packaging is better than items that come in packaging that will end up as trash. So example I always think about is like when I buy lettuce, if I can't buy loose lettuce, I buy it in the like plastic container versus the bag, because the container is recyclable, the bag is trash. So that's grocery shopping. For clothing and things like that, I take the extra time to do a little bit of research about the company. They've got information on their website with giving you transparency into where the products are coming from, And even companies now are taking on some producer responsibility for take back programs and recycling items that they've sold. That's a good sign of a company that you might want to put your money behind. If they've got no information on their website, you know, they might be doing something, but it's not great. I don't have a great recommendation of a specific like rating system or anything like that. That kind of stuff isn't really standardized nationally yet. There's no guidebook, unfortunately. But I do think that, you know, companies who are taking action will publish about it on their websites.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I also had another question, and I hope this isn't getting too in the weeds, but I'm really intrigued by the recycling process. It's so like behind the scenes to me. And, you know, when you said that like one, you know, bad object or one non-recyclable object can kind of ruin a batch, I just kind of wanted to, if you could give a little more granularity of like, what is the cost or like what happens when someone incorrectly recycles? Like, how do they, like, what processes are in place to try to allow for sorting still to happen? And, you know, how does that process kind of get messed up?
Yeah, great question. I could totally nerd out about this for a full hour. I got into the waste industry because for one reason, I visited a waste sorting facility and saw the scale of waste that's produced. And I was like, oh my God, I can't go on living my life the same way. So it's very intriguing. So I support your interest in it.
We might have to do a field trip out to the waste facility or something.
Absolutely. I'm here for that. So we'll talk. But essentially there's a couple of different things that happen once the material gets to the facility. So you put your item in the bin, a custodian empties that bin into an outside bin, like a dumpster or a compactor. That is picked up by a waste hauler. And for single stream recycling, it's brought to a material recovery facility. Ours is in Charlestown, under that bridge that you drive across, in case you ever want to keep an eye out for it. And from there, it's dumped on the floor of this massive warehouse, and it starts to go through a process of being sorted. And so the first kind of level of sorting is done by automated machinery. So it's very cool, actually. There's different kind of mechanisms used to sort out different material types. So there's a magnet that pulls out all of the cans and other metal products. There is this thing that blows like a gust of air to get any like loose light paper items out, and so on and so forth. There's a couple of different things, and then goes on a conveyor belt where there are actual everyday people who stand there and hand sort it out. And that's really, there's the thing that people don't think about when they're at the point of putting something in the bin is like, this is wrong. It could have a real safety concern for the folks who work at these facilities. So they're hands-on, you know, have their hands in the waste, and they're sorting out anything that the machinery didn't get. And things that really trip them up are like hazardous waste, like needles and broken glass. In addition to like food, depending on how long the waste is taken to get to the facility, right? That food can be moldy and it attracts rats. And so there's rodents in the trash, not a good situation. And plastic bags are a huge, huge safety concern for workers on the line. They get tangled in this machine that like shreds part of the waste. And so these people have to climb into this machine that has like spinning blades and pull out the plastic bags from the blades. So a real safety concern. That's one of the things that, the states cracked down on through this bag ban, is no plastic bags for that reason. So that's what happens. And then the material, after it's sorted out into different commodities, gets baled, which is just like compressed, and then it gets shipped out for use as raw materials in either remaking a product or, filler in roads and in concrete and things like that.
That was super helpful. And I'm so intrigued in this process now. I'm glad. Yeah, and plastic bags. I didn't realize that extra level of plastic bags are bad, but that's another reason in terms of getting recycling really well done.
Definitely. And I'm not sure if you heard, several years ago, we used to send all of our recyclables to China, and China put their foot down after years and years of us being such bad recyclers, us as in America. And we were sending them trash disguised as recycling, and they said, no more, we're not taking it anymore, which really turned the whole recycling world on its head, and made us reconsider the importance of proper sorting, because the purpose of recycling is so that you're capturing those materials to then be reused again. So if we're just disguising that process to, get rid of trash, it's not really supporting the whole system. So making sure our material is clean and dry, and there's no food, and there's no, hazardous objects that are posing a safety risk, is kind of supports the whole health of the system. Any other questions?
Seems like we might be reaching the end.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me. I am a full-time university employee. I spend a significant amount of time on the Med campus, so reach out to me if you want to talk, if you have an idea, anything. I am here as a resource. So Khalil and Candace, thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you so much, Katie. I really think this is like, for me, it really is a start of a conversation, and, making this be in the front of minds of people, because at the end of the day, I don't think the changes are, that dramatic, or at least on the personal level, we can do a lot if everyone kind of does their own little contribution. And the more we can learn about this process and how to do it right, the easier it'll be to kind of get everyone walking in the same direction. So thank you so much. This was really great to hear.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone who came. We so appreciate it. And have a good night, everyone.